Welcome everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator here in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania. And I also work in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a research and development institute that's focused on manuscripts, sort of broadly interpreted, although my own focus is on pre-modern manuscripts. And as a curator, I work with the digital materials and also with the physical materials. And I like to do outreach, which is Coffee with a Codex is part of that program. So once a week, every Thursday at noon, I take a book off our shelves and I show it to you. If you've been here before, I'm glad you're back. If this is your first time, you're very welcome. Be aware that this is a pretty informal event. So if you have questions as we go or you want to chat, go ahead and put them in the chat. My colleague Amy Hutchins is here. Amy is our manuscripts cataloging librarian, and she cataloged a lot of the manuscripts here, and she knows them very well. And she knows manuscripts generally, so she can often answer questions. As many days, I don't actually know a huge amount about this manuscript, so we're going to be doing a little bit of learning together. And what manuscript is this? So this is LJS 56. LJS 56. LJS means that it's part of the Schoenberg collection. So if I open it up here, you can see this nice little thing. The LJS manuscripts were collected by Lawrence J. Schoenberg, who sort of collected manuscripts from the 80s, probably the 70s, in the 80s and 90s. And he passed away a few years ago and donated his collection to Penn. And we're actually, next week, we're going to have our annual Schoenberg Symposium, which celebrates his collection and manuscripts generally. So LJS 56 is a sort of early 15th century manuscript. It's not very big in any sense. It is, pretty size. It's pretty easy to carry around. It has a binding that is just sort of a parchment wrapper almost. It is, let's take a look at the spine. So it's sort of coming apart. We'll see, it's quite delicate. I didn't realize how delicate it was going to be. But one of the nice things about having books like this is you can sort of see how it's put together. So here in the spine, you can see where the quires fit together. The quires are these little booklets where we have sheets that have been folded together and then they're sewn, and you can see here the sewing here, and also that's what's happening here. So in this case, there's some sort of strap or something that's inside this thread that is sort of you can even see it better here, a little bit of leather that is sort of holding the book together. So you get a sense of how the book was sewn together. And I'll talk a little bit about more about that as we look into it. So the text in this manuscript is called Logica Parva, or I guess Logica Parva probably. And it was written by Paolo Veneto or Paul of Venice. He was, I looked it up, he was a Franciscan, I think, friar who lived in Venice, and he taught at the university there. And no, sorry, he didn't live in, I'm going to look him up again. Let me see. I don't want to get this wrong. So he died in Venice. He joined Augustinian. So I was totally wrong. He joined the Augustinian order at the age of 14, and then he lectured at the universities of Padua, Siena, Perugia, and Bologna during the first quarter of the 15th century. This manuscript was completed in 1420. So within that period of time, and we believed it was produced in Padua by a student at the university. And this would have been while he was there. So this was definitely written during his lifetime, which is pretty cool. I think it's the earliest copy of this text that survives. Not the only one. It was very popular, and it had some of the early printed books also have this text. So this is a very popular text up through the 17th century. It is on something called terminist logic, and I had to look up what that means. Terminist logic is the study of terms. So it's sort of language study, and the idea of, in Latin specifically, that you have to be very sort of careful about what terms mean and all kinds of stuff. So that's sort of interesting. But I just want to look at this, take a closer look here so we can see sort of how this looks. So there are 8 books in the text, and each one of them begins with sort of a colorful, larger colored initial, and then there's the text written sort of around. The first words are sort of written around this big one, and then we have the text here. The script is Italian Gothic cursive script, and it's by 2 hands. So the first half of the book is written by one hand, and the second half is written by another person. And I'll talk more about that when we get there. But one of the things that I noticed as I was looking through it, and I think even if you don't know Latin very well, you can probably see this, is that the text is highly abbreviated. So that means that the scribe is not writing out every word fully. Every time you see a little line above or a sort of a squiggle, that's the scribe sort of shortening the word and putting in indications, so anyone reading this would be able to see what the words are. Also, the writing is quite small. So there are 8 books, and they're all contained in these 48 leaves. So it's not a big book, but there's actually a lot of text in here. But you'll notice that even though there's a lot of text, sorry, I'd have to hold this. The margins are pretty big, because I think it was written for a student. There could have been an expectation that there would be writing being done in the margins. One thing that I noticed as well as I was going through, so I just turned the page, this is parchment. We can see it's parchment because it's got hair follicles, and I can tell from the way it feels. This is parchment. This is paper. See if you can see it's sort of coming apart here. There are chain lines. So in early paper, you can see the lines that are made when whatever is kind of pulp is used to make the paper is put in a frame, and there are lines in the frame, and we can see it here. So this is sort of interesting. This is something that I have seen before, but the pattern is that the inner leaves of the quires are paper, and the outer and most inner ones are parchment. So this is parchment because it's the outside, and then we'll have a few pages of paper. Here's a marginal note here, so that margin is being taken advantage of. And then here is we're in the middle of the quire. This is called a bifolium because it's 2 folios that are physically connected. This is one sheet that was folded, and that is made of parchment too. So we have parchment on the inside and outside, and paper in the middle. You probably also saw, as I was turning through, these little stubs. Often when we see stubs in books, it means something has been cut out. In this case, I'm seeing them between almost every page. I think that this was another attempt during the binding process to strengthen it up. and you can see it is coming apart. Even with this, the paper is separating down the middle because it's just a little bit crispy, maybe. Although this seems to be pretty good paper, but it's not the best. So you probably saw also, as I was turning through, that in addition to those colorful initials, there are also these red initials that in some cases are decorated with this really nice brown, sort of brown text decoration. So even though this is a sort of a student manuscript, it is still, you know, there's been an attempt to make it sort of attractive to look at, which is sort of nice. There is also a suggestion, I think in the record or in one of the things that I read, that the first part of the manuscript is written by a professional scribe. So the scribe actually copied it out and it was purchased, and then the student finished it off. So I'm kind of excited to get to the second half so we can see how the second half is different. Here is the start of the second book here. So we have another one of these sort of colorful initials, not as big as the other one. And I did think it was interesting that they don't actually have, or the scribe didn't put in book numbers. So I was sort of looking for book numbers. It just sort of starts with the first words of the book here. So here's a very nice S there, and you can see these stubs that are put together. Oh, and it looks like there's some faces. That's always sort of fun. So here in the decoration coming down out of there, he's drawn a little face there, which is, I always like seeing things like that. It's a little bit playful. Here again, we're in the middle of the choir. So there's the thread down the middle, and again, it's a parchment page. Now we have some blue. This is a little different. The first one was all brown, and that's blue instead. There's also these little red markings here. They're essentially little paragraph marks. So it's a way to help the reader keep track of where they are. Pretty much every week, I'll point things like this out because they, you know, the scribes wanted to use as much of the space for writing as they could. So they couldn't do what we would do. If you look at a modern edition of this, there will be hard returns at each one of those little red marks. But they didn't want to waste the space. So you'll often see things like that. There are some examples of, it looks like someone later has come in and made some modifications here. Oops, trying to tighten this up. There we go. So this word has been marked out. This has been marked out. And then I think this has been added in the margin. Maybe, I think that because there's a little arrow almost, that little pointy, and there's a little pointy one here. And I think that that's a sign that someone came through and said, oop, that's the wrong word, so I'm going to change the word and put it in there. See, sorry, I haven't been looking at the messages. Let's see what's going on. Okay, Amy put that in. Someone had fun with the big initials. I think somebody did have fun with those big initials. They're pretty nice. Even the smaller ones, like this is a really nice D. You know, I think it's very nicely written, even though I don't think this is particularly fine. Like for a book of hours, but for a book like this, I think it's really nice. There's a nice E up here. Here is, I didn't see one before. Here's a catchword down at the bottom. So we can check and see if anything is missing. So these are, you can see that we're at the end of Acquire, one of these booklets, because there's a nice space there. Well, nice. I think it's nice because I can see that there's a space there. So we have Ad Suam is down here. And if we look up at the top of the next page, we can say Ad Suam. So we're good. And there's a very pretty decoration here. Let's see. Oh, this is, I just noticed down here, we have an Amen and an Alleluia there. And they are struck through with red, but I wonder if that isn't decoration instead of them trying to mark it out. I don't know. I just think it's interesting to see that in a logical text, because to a modern mind, you know, something like logic would be very different. But of course, he was an Augustinian friar, so he was a religious man, Paolo Benito. All right, and now we have parchments because we're the outer leaves. Here is our next book. So we have now a very nice purple O there. So I think that's book 3 now. We're in book 3. And I'm noticing this discoloration at the top of the page, which looks to me like the paper itself is maybe acidic. Sometimes, often when you see discoloration on the corners, usually you see them on the bottom corners, like down here. And it's because of staining from fingers, because people tend to turn pages from the bottom. And so, and this, because it looks like it's the discoloration of the paper itself. So maybe the paper, that might also help explain why it's sort of breaking down the middle, because it could just be naturally acidic paper, which just makes it a little more fragile than it would normally be if it was a better, higher quality. So here's our parchment again. And this has a lot of, I mean, there's no doubt that this is parchment because we have hair follicles up there. And then when we come down here, there's a whole other kind of, this is a very skin-like there. Okay, Stephen Reed. Yes, it was edited by Alan Perea in published in Brill in 2004, and I had a look at the introduction to that, so that was pretty kind of helpful in prepping for this. I didn't realize this. It was only edited from 6 manuscripts, and there are at least 80 extant. But he doesn't list the Pennsylvania copy, which is interesting because my understanding is that this is one of the oldest one, if not the oldest one. And I have to rethink what I said because I was just talking about the acidity of the paper, but this is parchment. So I don't know what's happening with the parchment there, if it's reacting to the paper or if it's doing something else. So if anyone knows, that's sort of interesting. So we're going to get soon to the end of the first half, which is, but first we have to stop and take a look at this beautiful. I like the way the artist sort of went all in on these. There's no gold, but they're very colorful. And this one even has, there's some kind of, I'm not sure how this was done. I don't know enough about the art, but it looks like there's like white, maybe the color was put down and then someone came through and painted over it with white. I also see white here, but that's really, or maybe they scraped it. They scraped it off, like when I was a kid and I'd put crayon, like you color with color and then put black paint over it. That's it. And then scrape the black paint off to make the picture and it's all colorful underneath. Something like that, I'm guessing, because I don't know. But I think it's very neat. So that's book 4, I think. And here we come to the And is that right? Is this, let me double check the numbering. Yes, so 1 through 22 is the first hand, and then 23 here is the next hand. And I think that's right. So let's take a look and see if we can see how different these are. And I can see it's the same kind of script, but it's a different person writing it. So I think this one looks a little rounder to me and a little bit bigger, and the pen is maybe thinner. But this is still very nice. And also there's the same kind of decoration on that, which makes me wonder if it might have been added later. I'm kind of looking at Amy. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Because it looks similar to the one at the front. So either this scribe was copying, or maybe somebody came through and did that too. But it's also fairly pretty. This also has parchment. This is starting with a parchment page, and then we have paper in the middle here. And I haven't really been talking about the text at all because I know very little about it, but I did write down the book titles so we can sort of get an idea of what he was talking about. So the first book, or Tractatus, which is, I suppose, not book, it's a different word, is sort of a summary. The second one is this on the supposition of terms. Third is on consequences. Then we have on the proofs of terms, on obligations, on the insoluble, which I think is things that are really hard or impossible to understand. And then the last two refer back to previous chapters. And I am not seeing, I don't know if there are those the big colorful ones. We might be to the end of the big colorful. Yes, the last initial, big colorful initial is on 20 verso, which is in the first half. So the second scribe does not include those sorts of big colorful initials, which is too bad. But we still have some nice red ones. And I wonder if, so here's another one with, no, this decoration isn't quite as fine as the decoration earlier on. But it's very nice. I think it was added. Well, I don't know. So here's a nice E with some of that. And there's a C over here. Let's see if we can get there. There we go. He seemed to like filling in the E's and the C's, which is pretty nice. Let's see. There's an I. Oop. And the first one I've seen, but I see more. There is a little hole that goes through several leaves where we've had a worm, a single worm. This is a wormhole. You can see it there, right above the eye. So sometimes you see a whole lot of them. Oh, you can see it even better over on this side. That's where it's gone through. So it's just can't come in and chewed right through several leaves, including, this is parchment. So it actually chewed through the parchment, which is a little bit unusual. I'm not used to seeing wormholes in parchment, but I guess there's a lot of paper, so it probably just came through the paper. We have a little time. What I wanted to do is see if I could, because I actually have the edition here in front of me. And so I was going to see if I could find a chapter number here. Let's see. Oh, Joyce, I think I missed you when we were probably looking at something else. Could it be a musical instrument? It reminds me of a harp. I think you were looking at, we were probably looking at a decoration there. Let's see, Stephen says the Logica Parva was written around 1393, just before or just after Paul returned to Padua from 3 years in Oxford. Okay, the oldest manuscript is dated 1401, is in Bologna. Okay, so it's not, so this is an early one, and it was during his lifetime, but not the earliest one. All right, that is good to know. So we have this. So I was going to see, so chapter 8 or book 8, Post Sumularum. Post Sumularum Obiectia nobis. Oh, it's right here. Declaratum notitiam. So this is the start of chapter or book 8. So instead of the big initial that we had at the start with the color, we have this instead. So that's just a scribal, a little bit of a scribal change. So I'm also noticing actually in this section that we have quite heavy ruling. So ruling is what was done to sort of prepare the page for writing. So before the scribe wrote it, the scribe or someone else would come through and sort of mark the lines, and that's what's happening here. So we have the columns being set, and it's being done in a sort of light, I think this is actually ink, and also down here. And I don't think, I'm just going to scoot back for a second because I don't remember seeing that. No. In the first half, there is not. Well, there's a little bit. Maybe I just didn't notice it, but it looks stronger, a little bit darker at the end. Okay. But it's interesting that the parchment and paper organization remains on both sides, because it does seem like there must have been some kind of plan for it, and why the second scribe picked up and finished it. And we actually know the name of the person who finished it, because there is a colophon here at the end. And a colophon, as you all probably know, is a little note that a scribe leaves. Not every manuscript gets them, but it's always nice when they do, because it can tell you things like names and dates. So this is it. And scriptum at where did you go? Here, Johann, what's his name? Johannem de Bellario. So that's his name of the person who finished it. And he finished it in April 1420. So this is how we know that the manuscript was finished in 1420. And we know the name of the second scribe. And we know who he was. He was a German Carmelite who studied philosophy at Padua while Paulus was teaching there. And he went on to a degree in theology in 1443. So he was probably quite young when he was writing this. And then he went on to do great things for himself. And that is LJS 56. So a nice little manuscript. And I hope that you can come next week. And that's an exciting manuscript. I'm excited about that. And then we'll, oh yeah. And then, no meeting in 2 weeks, but then in 3 weeks, come see big manuscripts with us, with McGill. So thanks everybody for coming. It was very fun, and I hope I'll see you again soon.